From CGTN headquarters in Beijing, this is The Hub with Wang Guan.
Hello and welcome to The Hub on CGTN. I'm Wang Guan in Beijing. This week, President Joe Biden blocked Nippon Steel's $14.9 billion bid to acquire U.S. Steel, citing national security concerns. The decision is seen as a major setback for the Japanese steel giant and has sparked heated debate on both sides. Supporters of the move, including the United Steelworkers Union, called it a victory for American steel workers and national security. Nippon Steel, of course, is calling the decision unfair and is challenging it in a court of law. What does this decision mean for U.S. Japan relations and the future of foreign investment in the United States? Could this signal a shift towards national security concerns being weaponized in the U.S. trade policies against not just its perceived rivals, such as China, but allies and partners too? To break it all down, we're joined by a panel of experts. Joining us from Tokyo, Japan, is Professor Lin Tai-wei, Professor of Business at Soka University, and Benoit Hardy-Chartrand, Faculty Lecturer in the Department of Political Science and International Affairs at Temple University, Japan. And in Beijing, China, we have Tom Pauken, geopolitical consultant and author of U.S. versus China, From Trade Wars to Reciprocal Deals. And in our Beijing studio, we have Einar Tangen, Senior Fellow at Taiho Institute and commentator on current affairs. Einar, let me turn to you. President Joe Biden said it bluntly, citing national security concerns in blocking the deal, surprise, surprise, saying without domestic steel production and domestic steel workers, our nation, referring to the United States, of course, is less strong and is less secure. Your reaction to Biden's remarks?
Well, quite frankly, all he's doing is playing politics. Nippon Steel gave an incredible deal. They were putting forward concessions over the governance, over guarantees of labor, and keeping it in the United States. Now, remember, Japan is a United States, one of its closest allies, and in the event that there was any kind of security threat to Japan, the U.S. and Japan are united by a defense treaty. So this idea that Japan is somehow a threat to the U.S. is nonsense, especially given that they can provide the much needed capital. U.S. Steel is not doing well. Their last quarterly results is just released, and their profit dwindled by half compared to what it was in 2023. They need the injection of capital, and they're not going to get it. There's going to be people who are going to be laid off, and I wonder what the Teamsters are going to say about the steelworkers, are going to say about that later on.
Yeah, Tom, let me turn to you. Aren't the United States and Japan supposed to be the strongest allies, and isn't Japan supposed to be the most trustworthy friend in the Pacific of the United States? I mean, what security risks are there specifically cited by Joe Biden?
Well, I mean, I can't speak on behalf of Biden, but I do know that Trump also had concerns about this merger and expressing some national security concerns, as well as the fact that the steel industry in America is a very crucial industry for our nation. So there are concerns that if you have a foreign buyer of U.S. Steel, which is a very iconic corporation, that this could be very challenging. However, I would anticipate that after Trump made a SoftBank deal, where basically SoftBank promised to invest $100 billion into $100 billion US dollars into the U.S. market over AI, perhaps the Trump administration may take another look at the Nippon Steel merger and give Nippon Steel perhaps some further consideration.
Okay, Professor Lim, let me turn to you. What do you make of Biden's decision, again, citing national security concerns, but this time against its the most trustworthy allies in the Asia-Pacific?
Well, it depends on the perspective that you're looking at this issue from. From the Japanese political elites, they actually want to have more information about what constitutes national security, because Japan remains keen to invest in the U.S., so they need to know with greater clarity what the how national security is defined by the Biden administration. If you're talking about the business community in Japan, they are also sort of wondering what constitutes the national security issues. And some of them have shown that they are kind of reluctant to sort of proceed further if there is some, political conditions that may prevent further investments from Japan. However, most experts in Japan agree that it does not shake the roots and foundation of the U.S. Japan alliance. Both countries remain tight, both economically as well as geopolitically. So I think at this point of time, most majority of the Japanese people, whether it's in the business or political communities, are asking for clarity of information right up to the Prime Minister himself.
I mean, could this decision be overturned because Nippon Steel is resorting to legal means to challenge this decision made by, of course, recommended by CFIUS and made by the Joe Biden, the outgoing Joe Biden administration in a court of law. So Benoit, let me ask you, after this decision, Nippon Steel's and, of course, the U.S. Steel have filed a lawsuit against Cleveland-Cliffs, its CEO, and the president of the United Steelworkers Union, saying that this decision violated the due process, alleging that this also violated the Sherman Antitrust Act of the United States and the federal racketeering laws. What do you make of that?
Right. Well, I'm not going to comment on the legal merits of the case itself, as I'm not a legal expert. But the goal of this lawsuit is to prove, first and foremost, that there was collusion between the government, between the union, and between their competitor, which is Cleveland-Cliffs. Now, what most legal experts will tell you here is that it's unlikely; these kinds of arguments are unlikely to convince the courts. And why? This is because courts are usually not keen to overturn decisions that are made by the executive branch, especially when these decisions are made on what is said to be national security ground. So I think this legal battle, however, is going to buy some time for the two sides. Here I'm talking, of course, about U.S. Steel and Nippon Steel, perhaps to keep the deal alive in the meantime, perhaps renegotiate it with the Trump administration. But for sure, the deal, the lawsuit itself is unlikely to come to any change in that decision. There are precedents before. There have been companies that have brought lawsuits in order to change decisions made by the White House on national security grounds, and it has been historically very rare. There's only one recent case in which the lawsuit succeeded in overturning the decision. So it remains to be seen what will happen here, but based on past precedents, I think we cannot expect this to change the decision made by the White House.
Einar, what do you think? Benoit is arguing basically this decision could hardly be reversed as simply buying some time for both companies.
Well, I agree generally, but let's first put this in perspective. CFIUS did not make a recommendation. What they did is, since the first time since 2006, they did not make a recommendation, and they sent it unrecommended to Joe Biden, who then proceeded to say that he didn't think it was a good deal. Now, CFIUS is the one that is supposed to be looking at the national security of these issues. Now, remember that it's changed. When it first started out, it was very industry specific. They would have looked at this deal in terms of U.S. Steel, what it meant to the market. Now they're saying that they have a much broader longer view of this, and they're looking out 10 years in terms of the industry as a whole and the effects on other parts of the industry. But they still couldn't come to a decision. So this tells you that it was probably politics above all, not legality. In terms of the challenge, yes, a lot of hurdles to mount, but they do have this issue of due process, and that's a constitutional issue. Especially if U.S. Steel is joining in, they can say that they were denied an opportunity here for their shareholders to cash out. All right, and if that's the case, then it would be a joint suit. It's not just a foreign company coming into the court and saying, hey, what about this? This is another entity.
Exactly, because U.S. Steel CEO David Burritt on Tuesday appealed, none other than President-elect Donald Trump, to reverse Joe Biden's decision It's from the U.S. Steel, the company that's supposed to be acquired by the Nippon Steel. And the U.S. Steel CEO, David Burrows, said this. He said the President referring to President Trump, can step in now and undo the wrongful, shameful, and corrupt actions of Biden.
Well, yeah, I mean, he's also playing politics and appealing to Trump's vanity in this particular case. But something Tom said is correct. Trump's outlook on countries are, what have you done for me lately? And if this $100 billion investment by the Japanese technology firm is okay, well, technology is considered, as we know in China, considered very, very sensitive. And if that's allowed, what would be the problem with steel? So there are contradictions, not that Trump cares about contradictions, he's going to act in the moment, but there is a chance.
Yeah. Tom, what do you think is the future, considering the legal battles that is being waged against this decision?
Well, it's all going to be Trump's decision. If you look closely at Biden's statement, it gives 30 days. 30 days later, Trump will be in the White House. And it's also my understanding that the Japanese Prime Minister is coming to visit Trump at the White House in February, according to reports that I read on Nikkei Asia. Now, this could also play a very significant role in Trump's decision that if the Japanese Prime Minister let's say, for example, the Nippon Steel executives also pay a visit to the White House, that perhaps they can provide a better understanding to Trump so that he could make a more informed decision. There are serious national security concerns that Trump is aware of. He also is an America First a promoter. He's basically the founder of the America First movement. So Trump will definitely care and concern about American workers who are at U.S. Steel and have some concerns with the union. But obviously, if the Japanese Prime Minister and Nippon Steel executives have good discussions with Trump and explain and maybe negotiate a better deal, that perhaps Trump may look at it a little bit differently.
Professor Lin, what do you think? Because we have memories of Trump's first term where he really befriended the late Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Abe took him dining and wining, had some of the finest sushis in Tokyo, and Trump turned out to be a big fan of his friend Shinzo. And then Trump administration did not wage major tariff wars or trade wars against Japan, as Trump said he would during his time on the campaign trail. Do you think similar things may happen again during Trump's second term?
Well, I think the idea here, or the consensus here, is that it's 50-50. 50% that he will consider Nippon Steel because of the merits of the case. And Nippon Steel itself has hired Mike Pompeo, who was the foreign secretary of Donald Trump's first administration, to be a senior advisor to this deal. So former Secretary Pompeo has been very active in showing and shoring up support for the deal. On the other hand, the Japanese business as well as political elites recognize the fact that President Trump is an unpredictable personality, and he may make decisions based on instincts as well as transactional interests rather than sort of careful sort of long-term interests, which Japanese tends to prefer. So it's 50-50% as to whether their appeal to President Trump can work. But Nippon Steel itself has been very busy rallying support from the local towns which the steel works are located in, rallying support amongst local politicians right up to the mayoral level to show up support for the deal. At the same time, they are also in they have voices within the conservative community, including those in the MAGA community that support its deal. So it's as all the other speakers have said, this is really the art of the deal that Trump will have to consider. Just one small anecdote. when the SoftBank boss Masayoshi Son visited the U.S. I think he got a lot of good publicity by committing $100 billion U.S. dollars to invest in the U.S. And perhaps half jokingly, President Trump actually asked him to double that in size. So to many Japanese, that is also the sort of the unpredictable personality that the President-elect Trump may have.
Yeah. And also on top of that, there's American domestic political dynamics at play here. Benoit, we know that the United Steelworkers Union is a very powerful lobbying organization in the United States. It strongly opposed the deal, the acquisition that didn't go through. To what extent do you think did political and labor dynamics influence this decision for Biden to block this acquisition?
Yeah, I think it played an extremely large role in this. I think it's almost exclusively political considerations that swayed President Biden in making that decision. One of the issues is that we're seeing in the last few years more and more protectionism in the United States, both among Democrats and Republicans. Traditionally, the Republicans were the party that overall tended to be more favorable to free trade, free flows of investments. But now in the last few years, they have, especially under Donald Trump, become more the party of tariffs and protectionism. So when it comes to this deal, however, to political considerations, voter considerations, there's no doubt that this played an extremely large part. The union that came out very, very strongly against the deal is a union that is based in Pennsylvania, which is a swing state, a very important state for both Democrats and Republicans. And also unions traditionally are very important to Democrats. This union in particular has always been very supportive of not only Joe Biden, but Democrats in general. So there's no doubt here future considerations that were at play, a desire to keep unions on their side, which is what in large part led the administration and Joe Biden to block that deal.
Yeah. Einar, is there still a pro-free trade party in the United States today?
Well, yes, but it's very quiet, for good reason. If they bring up free trade, they might be accused of being, a traitor to America. No, I mean, just like during the times of, Senator McCarthy, there's this kind of swing.
Joseph.
Yeah, Joseph and his, anti-American activities group and things like this. So right now, politically, you have to keep quiet if you're not going with the flow. What Donald Trump has set up here is what I call kiss the ring politics. He's very anxious to be the guy in charge. And he wants people to come and literally visit him personally, and then he'll make a decision. And as was said, some of it's on instinct. Others are part of different plans that he has. I mean, for instance, he wants to split apart China and Russia. He has other big concerns. But the economic ones are first. He's committed to making America great again by reindustrializing it. Unfortunately, with the value of the dollar, the labor expenses, everything that goes into compliance, construction, land, the time that goes in, as we've seen with all of these chip plants, it is not going to be an easy road for the U.S. to become competitive with countries that pay much less and are much easier to do business in.
Yeah, if you compare the Democratic Party today, the party of Joe Biden, versus the party of Bill Clinton in the 90s, a lot can happen in the span of 20 years, right? When you think about what Bill Clinton did to accept China into the WTO, embrace multilateralism, versus what Joe Biden is doing now, doubling down on Donald Trump's trade war against China, and now sanctioning its closest ally, Japan.
Yeah, but just let me add one thing. There is a real divide between the union leadership, which has gone Democratic most of the time, and all during this period. You can see in his first election, I mean, all the Democratic union leadership went Democratic. But what you saw was the workers themselves voted for Donald Trump. So there's this real schism that's in there. And this is going to get worse because the steel union may think they have a victory, but when steel workers start being laid off, they're going to hold it against the union.
Yeah, a very complex and complicated dynamics over there. Tom, what do you think this decision to block the acquisition of Nippon Steel, of U.S. Steel, would have on the broader Japan-U.S. relations going forward?
Okay. Well, thank you for asking. I focus mostly on strategy on my geopolitical consulting. And what I'd like to first address is earlier was mentioned that Nippon Steel had apparently hired Pompeo. To be honest, that's not a smart move. Trump's real forces, the real people he's really supporting, are what's known as a think tank called America First Policy Institute. Okay, this is their strongest supporters. Pompeo is not a member of that institute. It's a different think tank. So what I advise Nippon Steel to do is try to find closer connections to the American First Policy people, because they're the ones really talking to Trump every day. And also in regards to Japanese U.S. Japan relations, I believe they're going to be very great under Trump. And that when the Japanese Prime Minister comes to the White House to visit with Trump next month, hopefully, which is true, then this will be a very productive meeting. And I believe that there's going to be a lot of business deals made when that happens. And that, who knows, maybe there'll be even a bigger deal than what SoftBank offered next month. And that would be even more amazing. But let's focus on helping creating more jobs for Americans. This is what Trump is emphasizing with this America First policy agenda. Make more jobs in America. So if the Japanese companies open up more factories, boost U.S. manufacturing, and improve the supply chains inside the U.S., this will have a tremendous impact and will greatly improve U.S.-Japan relations. And I believe that when the Japanese Prime Minister visits next month, this is going to be one of the most amazing meetings for at least the first 100 days that Trump is in the White House.
Yeah, Professor Lim, let me ask you this. I mean, America regards itself as the champion of the free world, has long been the beacon of light for the global free market economies. How might this decision affect America's reputation as a welcoming market for global capital?
Well, I think the decision will kind of impact on the business community as they wonder what are the mechanisms as well as concerns that scuttled the deal, at least during the Biden administration. And they will also observe how the second Trump administration will adjudicate this deal because many within the Japanese business community are very enthusiastic to invest in the US. In fact, Japan is the largest investor in the US in terms of country ranking. So they want to know, as a point of information, how to avoid similar situations in the near future. Up till now, after President-elect Trump won the presidential election, the Japanese companies have already sort of committed opening EV battery plant in Kentucky, in addition to SoftBank's commitment to a US $100 billion investments. You are quite likely to see more Japanese companies follow in investing in the US because they think that is economically strategic as well as profitable to do so. So this will just be a minor sort of incident which they want to learn from and to get precise information on how to avoid similar situations in the future. And geopolitically as well as security-wise, the two ironclad allies within the Indo-Pacific lattice strategy network. There may be some differences between the second Trump administration and the Biden administration, but those differences are minor compared to how these two countries have sort of integrated each other into a regional lattice strategy framework and embedded themselves into many organizations within the framework that they think will outlast any changes in leadership in both countries.
Well, Benoit, do you agree that this is a minor incident in Japan-U.S. relations when it comes to trade and investment?
Well, the consensus here among the business community, even though they are rattled by the decision by the Biden administration, they oppose the decision. The general consensus is that this is more likely to be a one-off decision rather than a signal of a new shift in the way that the United States will approach investments coming from Japan. So, as most of the other panelists said earlier, including Professor Lin, I think it's unlikely to affect the broader contours of the relationship between the United States and Japan. And that is because even though investments, even though the trade and economic relationship matters a lot, fundamentally the strength of the U.S. Japan alliance is based on convergent political, geopolitical, security concerns. And their convergent views when it comes to the international order, when it comes to the order in the Indo-Pacific, these remain extremely strong. These concerns is what has been driving the reinforcement of that relation to, frankly, what has been very high levels in the last few years. So this is certainly a bump in the road, but it's unlikely to affect the strength overall of their bilateral relationship.
Mm-hmm. Einar, what do you think? A minor incident in Japan-U.S. relations, what are the reputational costs of this decision for the United States?
Okay, so if you don't trust your closest allies, that means you don't really trust anybody. And a country or individual who trusts nobody is inherently untrustworthy. This is not a small incident. It comes on the tail of Donald Trump announcing that that he's not taking armed force off the table in terms of acquiring Greenland. By whatever means necessary,
it's crazy. Panama Canal,
and then also Canada. And in terms of this kiss the ring kind of situation, he had Trudeau had come to his mansion and basically bring his knee pads, and as soon as he was gone, he belittled him and talked about a 51st state. These do not add up to a stable environment, and business is about predictability. I'm not going to invest if I don't know if I'm going to make money, and I'm not going to invest on a candidate who will be gone in 4 years. So I don't see this as a good prognosis for anybody. And I think the Japanese side is right to take a long view and say, well, in 4 years he'll be gone. But in the end of the day, where are they going to go? If the U.S. turns hostile, this idea that the world should support the U.S. economy is what Trump is selling. And that doesn't sit well with the rest of the world, especially those who feel that they've gotten the wrong end of the stick economically from these many, many years.
And that's certainly sending a signal to the transatlantic partners and allies, going forward.
Well, along that line, Trump has said that he wants 5% spent by the EU on defense. Well, can you imagine? Right now they're at 2%. So that's a 150% increase. And he's also indicated that he's going to go to Japan and South Korea and demand that they pay all of the costs plus protection fees for the use of the U.S. nuclear umbrella. These are not going to sit well with the public nor the governments. And the question is, how does this all add up in terms of the reputation, soft power of the United States? Is it being frittered away for illusory ideas that they're going to be able to reindustrialize?
Yeah. I think some folks in Brussels might get nervous for a good reason. And with that, thank you, gentlemen. That wraps up today's discussion. And thank you for watching this episode of The Hub on CGTN. I'm Wang Guan in Beijing. Our news coverage continues on CGTN. Bye for now.